The Bill O'Brien podcast reaches thousands of BC football fans each week. Your company has the unique opportunity to tap into this upscale audience by becoming a sponsor. Contact Mike Wynn at MWINN@BostonCollegeAS.com. That's Mike Wynn at MWINN@BostonCollegeAS.com for more information.
This is the Bill O'Brien Podcast.
That's pretty cool. Whenever he says that, I'm like, that's pretty cool.
With your host, John Meterparel.
Caught past the 25 to the 20 to the 15, goes Bond to the 10 to the 5 towards the end zone and in. Lewis Bond is the Eagle in the end zone, and Boston College is on the board. 32-yard pitch and catch. I don't even have to ask.
Think about it.
Take a bow, Lewis Bond. How do you like that?
Producer, Ciaccio.
Ciaccio was like
The gerbil in the back was cranking it up.
Yeah.
The Bill O'Brien Podcast.
This is a huge upgrade.
I'm thinking, this is not bad.
Yeah.
Not a bad way to go through
That's
life.
cool.
Episode 30, and I got to tell you, Bill, the number 30 is an underrated number in Boston sports history. There is any number of players we could pick that could really be qualified as a, legend's a strong word, but at least a memorable Boston sports athlete. You're looking at me like, who the hell are you talking
Well, I'm
about?
thinking about Gerald Henderson, but he wasn't 30, was he?
No.
I'm thinking about the Red Sox right now, which I know you always go right to the Red Sox. But who was number 30 with the Red Sox?
Jose Offerman.
Oh, come on, Meter. Jose Offerman.
Sam Hauser's number 30, isn't he?
He is.
Brian Hoyer checking
Brian
in.
Hoyer.
Yes.
The legendary Brian Hoyer. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah.
And Hauser is number 30. That's a great call by him.
No,
How about
Red Sox have had a lot of 30s.
What about wasn't not Devin McCourty, but Jason, wasn't he number 30?
Yeah.
Jason McCourty?
J-Mac.
J-Mac was 30. It's a good one, but come on. All right, Sam Horn, one of your favorite Red
I
Sox.
love Sam Horn. I do love Sam Horn. But Jose
Brian's
Offerman,
like, I don't remember Sam
God
Horn.
bless Jose if he's listening to this. I love you, Jose, but I mean,
Do you remember when they signed him? What
Yeah.
Dan Duquette said?
no.
You know Jose Offerman's good at going back on fly balls. That's why they give him millions of
My
dollars.
son, Michael, who plays at Tufts, baseball.
Yeah.
So his buddy, just speaking of the Red Sox real quick, got to tell you this quick 30-second story. So his buddy plays at Texas, who he played in high school with, shortstop at his high school team, plays at Texas.
Okay.
And they had an alumni game. You know who pitched against his buddy?
Roger Clemens.
The Rocket.
No way. Was he still throwing gas?
Yeah.
I bet he was.
Yeah.
Still throwing heat.
Yeah, he got up
He's got
against
to be 62.
He got up against the Rocket.
And 282 too.
Yeah, he's huge.
How about that?
That's awesome. What a moment for that kid.
Yeah.
My knees would be knocking getting in the box against him, man. He'd probably
Absolutely.
buzz you to this day.
What was the only 30s you have? Is Jose Offerman?
No, of course not.
Who do you have, Josh?
Mosey.
Mosey Tutupu.
I know, but you look at us like Mosey. Like you're right.
Tim
though. We
Thomas.
Duron Harmon
Jerry
was 30
Cheevers?
before J-Mac.
That's what I'm saying. This number has some legs.
I wasn't there with Duran.
Yeah,
Got some energy.
Duron, is you would have loved him.
Yeah.
He's like one of those all-encompassing veteran guys. I just saw him he was at one of the home games this year, and they had like a little alumni get-together, and he was one of my favorite teammates.
I heard great things about him. He's another Rutgers guy, right?
Yeah.
The Rutgers
It was
pipeline.
a Rutgers pipeline to the New England
Oh, yeah.
Patriots.
Yep. And how about Jerry Cheevers?
He said that. I you guys got me on the 30. Sorry,
What-
I wasn't. I
Old
was
It's not a great
Bruins
number.
figure.
I mean,
It's
if
not
I
a
was
great
a kid, I
You know what
wasn't
it is?
choosing 30.
It's a
I was
goalie
ill
number.
prepared for
Goalie?
this.
It's a
pod.
goalie. Bill Ranford. Remember
All
Bill
right.
Bill
Ranford?
Ranford. That was like a half an hour on the Bruins.
Jeez.
Bill Ranford. One of the greats. Tim
This needs to
Thomas.
be televised.
What were
so
you doing
everybody
on the
can see.
recruiting trip? You weren't looking up famous 30s
I
in
went to
Boston
50
history?
schools
I'm kidding.
in about 3 weeks.
My school.
I was at St. Ignatius, where he's a legend. So
Yeah, he is.
I've known Hoy for 15 years, or 16 years now,
Yeah.
because Hoy was a great player at Michigan State. And Bill, we needed a guy that could come in and, compete right away to be the number 2.
Yeah.
And Bill was like, hey, let's go try to find. And Bill would always kind of put the assistant coaches in charge of finding, guys that might be, 6th, 7th round, undrafted, whatever. He would always kind of put us in charge of that. And so I went out to Michigan State for a legendary workout with Brian Hoyer.
It was legendary. I mean,
it was like an hour long.
This guy was he was having me roll out right from the left hash and then throw like deep corners back to the left side of the field. And I thought to myself, like, God, if this is what the NFL's like, I don't know how I'm gonna make it. I mean, I did okay, but you were one of the few. It was like you, and then there was a few people from the Panthers that came out and worked. That's where I thought I was going to go. But you came and worked me out, and then I had a great meeting with Nick Casario down at the East-West Shrine game.
Yep.
And so I kind of knew, but then I looked at the roster, and I was like, well, they have Brady.
Yep.
They just drafted Kevin O'Connell the year before, and then Matt Gutierrez has been there forever.
Yep.
So I was kind of like, it's cool that I'm getting worked out by Bill O'Brien, and obviously I grew up in Cleveland, so I Coach Belichick was the coach for the Browns when they left. So I thought that would be a cool opportunity, but I didn't really think going into the draft, and then each round went by, and I wasn't getting drafted, and after the draft, my agent's like, I think you should go to New England. I'm like, what are you, nuts?
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to fit in there? He's like, trust me, like, I know the guys up there really well. They obviously thought enough about you to send Billy to go work you out at Michigan State, and I think we kind of hit it off, and I had a good meeting with Nick. I hadn't even met Bill yet, and I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? Worst case scenario, I'm going to be in the room with Bill O'Brien, Tom Brady, and Bill Belichick's the head coach. Like, I was kind of just thinking like practice squad at that point. And then he coached his butt off.
I learned a lot from him that I still carry to this day. When he came to rookie minicamp, one thing that Bill would want us to do was like throw the kitchen sink at everybody.
Okay.
Like all these guys, especially the quarterback, to see how much they could handle. So like the very first day, we put in like 40 routes. Oof. And he had, in rookie minicamp, you have maybe 25 guys there. You have a few receivers, yada, yada. You have enough to have a 7-on-7 and things like that. So then he and the meetings aren't like long. The first meeting's long.
Yeah.
And that's a funny story too about the first meeting. Bill walked in. I'll let him tell that one. But when we went out the next morning, we were getting ready to practice after we brought him in the night before, and I said, okay, you ready to go? Because we don't really have a long meeting. He's like, what? Yeah, we're running these plays, ready to go. So we went out there, and I'll never forget it. We had like, let's just say at 12 plays, 7-on-7, he took all the reps. He was like 10 for 12, and he was like, choo, choo, choo. And I was like, whoa. So the next meeting or whatever, I was like, how did you know the plays? Like, how did you study the plays? He's like, I studied the plays. I looked at the drawings, and I saw the words associated with the drawings. I tried to learn every play, but I couldn't learn every play. So when the play was called, I just envisioned the drawing, and I knew where to start my read.
My God.
I was
Interesting.
and so I use that to this day. You
That's
have to
really
at least
good.
Be able to.
The little trick was.
You remember telling me that?
Oh yeah, but the thing was, I realized that it was so much information. There was no way to retain it all. But to me, I knew, and not to get too far into like football, but we basically had 2-man concepts and 3-man concepts, and they were built. If it was in 3x1, you were going to have a 3-man concept and a 2-man concept, and if it was 2x2, and I thought to myself, like, it's going to be too hard to learn all these formations. Like, I hope everybody else, like, I hope the receivers and the tight ends like do their job well enough to know.
Yeah.
But if I hear the word Utah, which was a route 2-man combination, all I knew was it had to be some kind of 2x2, and then I would just think about how he taught me the read and the pictures, and so there was times where I get the play call, and I would just pray that everybody knew where to line up, because if I knew in my mind I heard a play, I was like, well, there's got to be 3 guys over here, and there's got to be 2 guys over here, because I'll know what the 3 guys are doing and the 2 guys are doing, but if they don't know where to line up. Like, and that is, they would yell at the quarterback, like, you got to know where to put these guys out there. I'm like, there's no way for me to take all this information in. But going back to that first night of rookie meeting,
this is a great story.
We've probably spent 12 hours together at this point, because he's right. It's like they're going to throw everything at you. And it's got to be like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And he's like, and I swear this was a setup, and I don't know, maybe I'll find out the truth right now. He's like, all right, I need a break. Like, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. And he had just got done teaching me how in the Patriots offense, everything is basically called from the strength of the formation to the weak part of the formation. The tight end always sets the strength of the formation. So I'm like, all right, that makes sense. Like, always wherever the tight end is going to be, that's how we're going to call the pass plays. We're going to call the tight end side to the weak side. So Billy, he's like, all right, I'm going to take a break. Like, I'm going to grab a coffee. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to keep going over this stuff. And he walks out, And like literally 60 seconds later, Bill Belichick walks in, and he gets up on the board. He's like, "All right, now, like, I don't know what you did at Michigan State, but like here we do everything from the weak side to the strong side." And I'm like,
The opposite of what I
I'm
told
like,
him.
what? But I wasn't going to say that. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, so for instance, how would you call this play? And if Billy had just told me it was called Utah Toga because it was from the strong side to the left side, I was like, oh, that's Toga Utah, because I wasn't going to question Bill Belichick. But then he leaves. He's like, all right, good, right, that's right. So he leaves. Billy comes back in, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, but basically everything you just told me, Bill came in and told me the opposite. And I think he was trying to like maybe see if I was going to question him, which obviously the first day of being a Patriot, I wasn't going to do that.
Yep. No, I forget exactly how that all went down because he was in it, so he has a better memory than But it was, Well, then he, you know, Brian, I left. I went to Penn State, and he had his career, and then he played for me in Houston.
Yep.
No, I know.
And we went to the playoffs.
Yeah, worst game of my life though was that playoff game.
But we went to the playoffs.
But you
and
got
then,
there.
Yeah.
You know,
that was a crazy year. I dealt with some concussion. Remember that? I had to go see a specialist. This is right when that movie came out.
Yeah.
And so everybody was hyper sensitive to it, and actually playing against the Patriots. And I give Ninkovich crap about this all the time. I'm like, you gave me a concussion. He goes, it wasn't me, it was Hakeem Hicks, which Hakeem Hicks at the time was a beast.
Yeah,
and,
massive human.
and he kind of ragdolled me down, and I was having these issues, and then I got sent to see this specialist in Pittsburgh.
yeah.
And they're like, actually, you have a neck problem that's causing these.
Yeah, I
and so
remember that.
then we felt pretty good about me going back out there and playing. We made it. We needed to win a few games to make it to the playoffs, but then that was the worst athletic performance in the history of my athletic career.
and it was pro football is very, very difficult because when you're in it and you're coaching, you're actually, especially with the quarterback, you're the coach, he's the player, but you become friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your wives become friends, and then you're the head coach, and then you bring. And I like fought to bring Brian to Houston because that was my second year, and we had Ryan Fitzpatrick and moved on, and then we brought Brian in, and then, you know, whatever, it didn't work out. I mean, it did. I mean, we went to the playoffs, but it didn't totally work out to, you know, to the level we wanted it. So we kind of like, we drifted for a while, and then we've since made up because in many ways, you know, a lot of that was my fault. Like, you know, didn't fight hard enough to keep him and all that. And he ended up playing. How many years did you play? 15?
After that, yeah. I mean, I played 15 years.
15 years of career.
That's an amazing run.
It was one of those things.
But
you're
pro
right.
football's tough, though. So, you know, those are the things that happen. But now he's back here, and when I came back to the Patriots last year, which was not, or two years ago, which was not, we're not going to talk about that year, but you know, we became, and then when I got here, he's been to practice, bringing his son to camp, so it's
It's
awesome.
like family, right? Like you go through ups and downs, and I credit so much of my just getting my career started to him, and the belief he had in me. And then obviously you left for Penn State. I remember so I got released by the Patriots that year, and Billy had left to go to Penn State. Remember, I called you and I said, dude, I realized I have no one else throughout the league, that I have no connection to anyone because you were my coach for these years. You went to the college level, and so now, and I was out of football for 10 weeks. I was actually, you talked about St. Ignatius. I just was on Coach Kyle's podcast, and that year I would literally go down and I would help not only coach their practice, but I would be their scout team quarterback in 7-on-7, and I would throw routes to the receivers because I knew I had to stay in shape.
I remember.
And then, you know, just the way that our paths were able to meet back up in Houston, and then like he said, we drifted, and then I'll never forget. I don't know who I was playing for.
The Colts,
and we saw each other pregame, and it was like, you know what?
Like it wasn't.
Yeah, we gotta, you know,
business part nobody likes to hear.
Yeah.
So here's, I gotta tell this story too. So he was a rookie.
Ciaccio, you and I shouldn't have come today.
Put him down.
This is a good one. This is a good one.
I'm kidding.
I love the guys that I coach. So
of course,
he was a rookie, and we were playing the last preseason game, and he had a good training camp, and so we had a guy. I'm not going to mention his name. We had a guy who was battling in that training camp, and it was, he just didn't, the guy didn't totally believe in how we were doing things offensively. Like, why do we make a mic point and all this? So I basically told Bill, I'm like, and this guy was going to split, like this guy was going to play the first half, Brian was going to play the second half. So it's kind of a two-story thing. So we go into the meeting the night before the game or whatever, the day of the game, whatever, night before the game. And so, boom, this guy's like, well, why do I have to make a mic on that? Yada, yada. So I just this meeting's over. And I got up and I went to Bill and I'm like, Bill, we can't play this guy. We got to go the whole game with Hoyer and see what he can do.
Yeah.
Just give the game to Hoyer. So Bill's like, yeah, fine with that, whatever. So that's what we did. So we're playing the Giants. And they're playing like their guys in the beginning of the game.
It's like the team that beat Brady in the Super Bowl. It's like Justin Tuck, Antonio Pierce, who was my head coach in Vegas last year as the Mike linebacker.
Yeah.
And we're playing
O.C. Umanora. All those guys.
We're playing all of our guys that are
Rookies.
basically going to not make the team.
It's the fourth preseason game.
My goodness.
Because Bill would want to see how these guys would perform against the best players. But I'm coaching this poor guy. And I'm like, look, Brian, once you take your drop, get the ball out. Do not scramble. Just if it's not there, just throw it away. Or whatever. If it's cover 2, check us into a run. Whatever you need to do to keep yourself out of danger.
To not die.
So he called. We run a play, and he remembers this probably way better than me. But he decides to scramble. He's a good athlete, but he's not fleet of foot.
Yeah.
So he decides to scramble towards our sideline. So I'm like, dude, go down, because I can see Umanora chasing him from behind, and he's gonna crush him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just go down.
Yep.
No, he doesn't go down. The guy tackles him from behind and rubs his face into the
my God.
turf. He burned the side of his face.
Oh man.
The next day, remember? He played,
God.
but he played the rest of the game.
I'll never forget.
It's
At the Sheridan 4 Points. We're in the meeting room, and this guy's going over we would go over the call sheet, and Billy's kind of you kind of go back and forth, okay, what do you do on this? And I remember Billy just slamming the book shut and being like, "You're playing the whole game tonight." And then you just walked out, and I was like, "Oh boy!"
I was
I'm trying to make the team, and now I'm playing the whole game tonight.
like,
And
Bill,
it was a rough start but when they took those starters out, we crushed them. I think we threw for 350 yards, touchdown to Greg Lewis.
He made the team.
Yeah,
As
Greg
an
Lewis.
undrafted quarterback,
That's amazing.
he made the team.
yeah.
And that was a huge achievement for him to be able to do that, because that was not an easy team to make. That was a good team.
Oh yeah.
But there was probably, that year was kind of a weird year, the 09 year.
Yeah.
Because we were 10-6 and we got drilled in the playoffs. We just it was just not a great chemistry on that team. But then when we moving forward to 2010, that was one of the better Patriot
We were
offenses.
14-2, right?
Yeah.
That was when
We were good on offense.
they drafted Gronk and Aaron, and we kind of implemented that 12 personnel system, which
That's
no
right.
one had ever seen.
Yeah, that was unstoppable.
But that's
Man,
there's
the
some good
stories are plentiful. I'll tell you what, you guys
He
should
has way more than that about
step
me.
aside David Andrews on your podcast.
I know. I've just been Billy O show. David, watch out.
But David Andrews is
I
he the
love
best? Oh my God, he's the best.
I knew when Billy came back that he and David would hit it off.
I love
right
that
away.
guy.
Yeah.
He is the best.
You touched on a couple things when you were talking about, learning the system. Football obviously is complex, especially making the leap from college to the pros. Did you ever feel like, you mentioned it for a second, but overwhelmed, and that therefore now you feel like you look at a Drake May or any rookie quarterback that comes in, you're a great guy to say, "Hey Drake, here's how it's done." Do you ever? First of all, did guys reach out to you?
Yeah, I
ask
mean,
you for
I've
advice?
talked to Drake a few times because I covered some of the preseason games, so I got to meet with him. I've seen him down there a few times. I think the one thing that's unique to me is I've had so many different experiences. As Billy just mentioned, I came in, I was not drafted. I had to work my butt off to make the team. Then I got cut. And then I went on this journey. I went to Arizona, started the last game of the year. Then they traded for Carson Palmer, which I had learned at that point, you got to be an advocate for yourself, because I'm looking at him all right, you traded for Carson Palmer, you signed Drew Stanton, who was a Michigan State guy, who's been with Bruce Arians for however many years. Where do I fit in? And I remember going to talk to Jason Light, who was doing a great job down in Tampa. I said, Jason, I appreciate you. You stood on the table for me. You wanted to bring me back here, but I just don't see how I fit in. And he's like, all right, and let me see what I can do. And then I remember talking to Mike Lombardi, who was in Cleveland, who had been a Bill guy who knew who I was, and he's like, I'll bring you here, which for me, that was going home.
Right.
So I go back to Cleveland. I end up taking over to be the starting quarterback. We win 3 games, and I tear my ACL. Then I go back the next year. I'm the starter. They draft Johnny Manziel. So I've been through almost all these different scenarios. I remember going to leave Cleveland to go to Houston. And Cleveland benched me for Johnny, and I was like, I got to figure out a better place to go. And Billy was the head coach in Houston. I was like, this is perfect. Like, I'll finally get a chance to play. I didn't play for him in New England because Tom was a quarterback.
Right.
And so went there, and we just talked about that. And then I was like, all right, where do I, and it's all about relationships. So I knew a guy in Chicago who was the offense coordinator. He signed me 3 weeks in. Cutler gets hurt. I'm starting quarterback there. I had the best stretch of my career. I threw for like 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in 5 straight games, and then I break my forearm.
Oof.
And so then Kyle Shanahan is named the head coach in San Francisco, and he was my coordinator in Cleveland. He's like, I need someone who knows the offense. So then I went out there, and I was a starter for them. And then I was a part of this Jimmy Garoppolo trade, and then I came back, and now I'm the backup to Tom as like a veteran guy. And that was really cool. The relationship I had with Tom, like my first 4 years, was kind of like, do you remember you were like, hey, text Tom and see what time he wants to meet at the hotel? This is like probably like week 11 of the season. I'm like, I don't have his number. He's like, what do you mean you don't have his number? I'm like, well, I don't want to like make it awkward and be like, hey, can I get your number? Yeah. And so I was just the young guy learning from him. And then I come back in 2017, and I've played a lot of football at that point. And Tom would be like, hey, when you were out, in Houston with Billy, like, what did you guys do for this? And so he was very inquisitive.
He wanted
to know. Or when you played for Kyle Shanahan, like, talk about their play action game. And and our friendship really grew from there because we were similar life stages. Our kids were close in age. And but I've kind of seen it all. Like, I've worked my way in. I was the starter. I've been cut. I've been benched, all of those things. So I think, back to your question, I feel like I'm a valuable asset to young guys because if they come to me with a question, I've probably lived through it already.
The other thing that he did a great job of is, like he's saying, he'll never say this really about himself, but he was always around. So like I tell young guys I learned a lot from these guys. So like I tell like these guys here at BC, hey man, when you're done lifting, okay, you don't have class till 1:00. Let's get over here and watch some film. Yep. These guys. So like he was always in the building. He was around. Like he was there at like 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, he was
a gym rat.
Yeah.
He was a gym rat.
If you love football and you make it to the NFL, it's like the
greatest job in the world.
I mean, I would remember there was times that you and Tom would be like, "Hey, you guys would kick me out of the meeting because you had to have like the rough conversations about the game plan." But I was like, I mean, for me, that was
the game planning with Tom Brady was a negotiation. It wasn't like
it wasn't Billy kicking me out. Tom would be like, "Hey, Hoy, let me grab Billy for 15 minutes." I come back in.
I hate this play.
Billy's face would be all red. Like I knew there was an intense conversation being had. But for me, when I finally made the team, it was kind of like, oh my God, this is what I get to do. And so you're right. Like I'd be there early. I'd sit there and learn to watch film. I'd watch Tom, the way he would address the offense, the way he would talk to the receivers. I mean, for me, I don't think obviously I was heartbroken when I didn't get drafted because I thought my agent was like, look, Carolina has told me they're going to draft you like in the 4th or 5th round. So I bring like the ESPN cameras around my house. I'm like, this is going to be great. And it didn't happen, but when I look back on it now, what I learned in those first 3 years being around Billy and Tom, I would have never made it 15 years in the NFL had I not found that foundation.
Yeah, it is. When you think back on the fact that you weren't drafted is the dumbest thing.
Well, I'll tell you what, BC fans remember you.
Oh gosh, that was not a great game
either. That was Matt Ryan's last game.
Yeah.
And I was calling it, and it was back and forth.
Silva got me that day.
Silva got you.
2 picks.
He was on All-American.
Yeah, he was a good player.
First team All-American safety, which came out of nowhere.
Kiwanuka was playing then too, or
no, he had left.
Or the other linebacker,
Herzlich. Herzlich, yeah. But you guys had a heck of a team.
We did.
But what do you remember most about that day besides Silva?
That's pretty much all I remember because that was like it was a close game. When I think back, I remember thinking we got our butts kicked, but when I go back and look it up, it was actually a pretty close game.
It was.
I remember talking to you about that game.
Well, you wanted to talk about like luck.
Yeah.
So that was my first bowl game. I played against Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
He's the number one. Was he number one quarterback taken that year?
Yeah.
Right?
Number
3
overall.
pick overall.
Yeah.
The next year I go play, and it's Matt Stafford. He's the number 1 pick. So those are the 2 quarterbacks that I got to play against in bowl games.
Pretty good.
No, I remember leaning into BC when I was at St. Ignatius High School. They've had a lot of kids come to BC, and I was very interested in coming here. But I remember the one thing was they wanted me to come throw in person.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, we can either go fly up to Boston, or he was going to take me on a little tour. And he's like, we can go and hit. I had offers from like West Virginia, South Carolina, Maryland. And so he's like, I can either consolidate the funds to fly to Boston to go check out BC, or we can drive and we kind of hit West Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, North Carolina, Wake. And I was like, well, these schools have already offered me, and they don't need to see me throw in person, so maybe they like me better. And so that's kind of the route that we chose. But Scott Mutrin, a guy that I'm really good friends with, I know he calls the games here now, and he was a quarterback at my high school. So I always looked at him, and there was a guy named Dave Ragone.
Yeah, Ragone,
who
who's
had
coaching
gone to Louisville.
Yeah.
And those were kind of my two, call them idols, as quarterbacks at my high school.
Yep.
And so oddly enough, John L. Smith was the quarterback for Louisville. He went to Michigan State, and so he recruited me I was their number one guy.
Yeah.
And I think when you're getting recruited, you want to feel like you're their person.
Yeah,
and so that's kind of where I went. But I really, and now living here, my kids go to school right off campus. I mean, it's such an amazing place.
Yeah, it's a cool place.
It is.
But we're trying to, like I told you guys, we got back. When Tom O'Brien was the coach here.
Yeah, that's who it was.
They recruited Cincinnati and Cleveland.
Heavy.
And I was with Matt Turin in Cleveland, went to all those, St. Ignatius, St. Ed's, all of them.
Moeller.
Went down to Cincinnati,
Elder,
went to Moeller, Elder, LaSalle, St. X, all that. St. X is where Tom O'Brien went.
Yeah.
Danny O'Brien recruits Cincinnati, and Matt recruits Cleveland. So we're trying to get that back. There's got to be 2 or 3 or 4 kids that can play at Boston College.
Oh.
We've hit every Catholic school in the country.
But that's the thing, in Ohio, the Catholic high
just
schools.
go with it. Would you, Meter?
Well, who knows? That's possible. You're well
I
traveled.
hit every Catholic school in New Jersey. And
I
just
bet you
about
did.
every one in Ohio.
Yeah, but that's good football, and in Ohio, traditionally the best teams are the Catholic schools.
Yeah.
And so you have these
Here too.
but you have these boys in Ohio that grow up loving football.
Yeah.
They go to a Catholic school, and literally like all my teammates either wanted to go to Notre Dame or Boston College. So it's just one of those things,
Yep.
and like you said, there's a storied history. Like Luke Kuechly's from Cincinnati.
Yep.
Chris Hovan was a guy who went to St. Ignatius, who came here and played at BC.
He's
So
a great
you
player.
kind of come up in these programs, and as you establish yourself as a good player, you're like, oh, well, so and so went to BC. Like maybe I could go there.
Yeah.
The great Cadillac family.
Kind of
Yeah, the Cadillacs. That's right.
Cadillacs.
You kind of glazed over it. What was the Johnny Manziel experience like?
It was interesting. I mean, when you hear the owner say, the homeless guy on the corner of the street told me we should draft him, you're like, this is, but look, you and I have witnessed the NFL. Like, if I told you stories, people wouldn't believe you.
Yeah.
Johnny and I, like, I never had a problem with Johnny. And he would, like, he and I would interact in the quarterback room, but we weren't friends. Like, I felt like I had a job to do, and this was my opportunity to be a starting quarterback in my hometown, and that's what I went in every day to deal with. And so he and I never had any issues with each other. And it was just, for me, it was like you kind of had like the 50% who wanted the hometown kid to be successful when it came to the fans or even the people in the building. I mean, there was the amount of people that I had to deal with who they wanted Johnny to play because of business reasons, not because of winning football games. That was the hardest part. And which, look, that led me to go play for you in Houston, which was fine. But it was one of those things that, like, you think playing for your hometown team is like this great thing. And there was a lot of great parts, but that made it very hard because I think people were torn because he was the Heisman Trophy winner. He was all of these things. And for me, this was my one opportunity. This is the first time I've ever been a starting quarterback in the NFL. I was going to do whatever, and coming off of a knee injury. So, it's one of those things that you just have to figure out how to, like, control the things you can control, but at the same time, you're a human being.
Right.
We spent a lot of time on Johnny Manziel in Houston because he was from Texas, Texas A&M, and Bob McNair was like, look, we need to do our due diligence on all these quarterbacks. And so in that year, it was Johnny Manziel, it was Teddy Bridgewater, it was Blake Bortles, it was Derek Carr. There were some good quarterbacks in that. So we spent time on all these guys. But so we go to A&M, and I like Johnny. Like, I spent time with him, and whatever. He's character. It's
kind of hard not to like.
Yeah, he's on podcast. I hear him. Like, he mentions sometimes the meetings that he had with me because we had 2 or 3 meetings with this guy.
Nice.
Me and Gotzi. And so we go to Texas A&M. It's me, Rick Smith, the general manager, and I think Gotze was there and maybe one other guy. And we work him out. So we do a little workout with him, and then we go. He's like, hey, where can we have lunch? All right, so we're going to go to this. Hey, yeah, well, there's this country club up the street. We'll have lunch at this country club. So we're like, okay, whatever. So we like follow him to this country club, and it's this beautiful brick like Texas country club right outside of campus, right outside of A&M's campus. We walk in, we follow him in. He was the man. The bartender's like, "Hey Johnny," the caddy guy. "Hey Johnny, what's up, man?" He's like, "Hey, what's up, guys?" But he was the man at this country club. I was like, "This is unbelievable. This guy should just stay in." He should, you know what I mean? He's got it.
Mayor of College Station.
He's got. Oh yeah, he is an absolute Texas like legend.
Well, he built on this persona. First of all, people thought he was loaded, like from a family that was very rich, but he wasn't.
No.
He made that up.
His dad was a.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he made that.
I don't know. You're educating me now.
There's a documentary on him that came out.
Yeah, I think it's
ago.
on Netflix or something.
It's on
HBO.
People ask me, "Do you watch it?" I said, "I lived through a lot of it. I'm not watching that."
Yeah,
but he was a Texas legend.
But he had right, and he knew exactly what the game plan was to get to that point. Yeah. But he is a true. I mean, you can either answer this or not answer this. He never cracked open a playbook.
Where I was going.
The only thing that I would know, and the only reason I say this on here is because I know that he's talked about it on whatever. Yeah. I've seen him talk about it and when Mike Pettin, who was the head coach at the time, brought me in to say, "Hey, look, we're gonna play Johnny over you." I'll never forget this. He goes, "This is a battle I've been fighting all year." He goes, "But at this point, that's what we're gonna do." And he goes, just between you and I, like I went to go check his iPad because they didn't. You could check the iPad, like how much. He goes, he hasn't been on there 0 hours. It's 0 hours. He goes, just so you know, and like that was. I mean, look, this is where like it's not always about football, right? And and
in the NFL, there's 32 organizations. There's probably, I would say, 8 that really get it.
Yeah.
And that might be a lot. But there's like, let's just call it 8 that really get it. 2 of them are in the Super Bowl coming this Sunday. Right. Those 2 organizations, like, they get it, right? Kansas City and Philadelphia. And then there's, let's just call it 24 organizations that, like, it's either all about selling tickets or the structure of the organization is wrong or they've mismatched the coach with the GM. They don't come from the same trees. They don't believe in the same things. It's not that one guy's right and one guy. I've talked to you guys about this.
Yeah.
It's just that you know, and so that's just the way it is, and that's why in New England for so many years, and hopefully it's back to that now with Mike there, and the staff that he's bringing in and the people that he's going to have. You're going to have everybody on the same page because that's the way it was for so many years. One guy ran the show.
Yeah,
and he ran it. There's other ways to do it, though. If you have a GM and a coach, like Mike Tomlin, he's never had a losing season. He had Kevin Colbert for many, many years, and now he's got another GM. But they're on the same page. Maybe they don't win it all every year, but he's never had a losing record, which is incredible as a head coach in that league. So, like, you have these organizations, then you have these other ones that are like, "Hey, man, we need to sell tickets. We gotta, dude, it ain't about selling tickets.
Right.
Winning sells tickets." So, like, that's kind of what he dealt with in all these different organizations he was in.
It's cause and effect. It's amazing. Have you thought about coaching?
He coaches his son. His son is awesome.
You know what? It crosses my mind because I think I would be really good at it. But then I have so much respect for these guys, and like I witnessed them being in at college. College may be different, but in the NFL world, especially when you were there. I mean, Billy be there at 5:30 in the morning, and then he'd be leaving at whatever 10:30, 11 at night, and Tom would have emailed him all the notes. So the job, and for me, I think I always tell my wife Lauren this. I think if I had a career where I was maybe in one place for an extended period amount of time, and we weren't moving from place to place, then maybe I would consider it.
Right.
But right now, I think if you get in the coaching business, you're getting in the moving business because you either get fired or hired, and then you have to move again. And so I think as long as we finally put our roots down here. My son goes to Zavarian Brothers, and he's very happy there. He loves it. My daughter, she has her friends at her school and all those things. And I think at least until they get to college, where now I've finally given them a stable life. Like I just don't know unless Billy's going to hire me to be like a part-time quarterback coach.
go, man.
We can end now if you want.
Yeah.
You guys can negotiate.
I think
Negotiate on a napkin.
I coached at Zavarian a little bit this year. I helped the quarterbacks at Zavarian Brothers, so Will Wood, and I found a lot of joy in that. And I said, look, I don't really want to be involved in like plays or scheme. Like I just want to come and work on his fundamentals, and so that was pretty gratifying. And then they go on to win the Super Bowl down at Gillette, which was awesome. And he's a great kid to work with. But Coach Fernaro, he kind of reminds me of my high school coach, kind of like a true throwback. Like they're actually lining up in the eye. They got a fullback. I love this. So
the conference, baby.
Yeah. So I'm not ruling it out. I never say never, especially being in the business that we're in. But I've enjoyed doing some media stuff this year too, and
good.
I feel like if you play football as long as I do, then you can one of those two paths. Because I feel like I've earned a master's degree in football at this point.
Yeah, you can help the fans understand. I've seen you on TV.
That's what I try to do.
You're a PhD, man.
Yeah, I try to be analytical instead of being critical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you definitely.
But you know what we're talking about Vrabel. I was listening when you called in. Hey, Mike. First time, what was it? Long time
listener, first time caller. Are you gonna keep Elliot Wolf? But they kind of screwed that up.
They screwed you up. They were like, Bill in the car. Let's go to Bill in Chestnut Hill, and I'm going like,
now
right
he's
now
gonna
he
know
knows who it is.
Come on,
they had my Boston
giving you like
accent
totally different name.
I always tell the story of obviously being here with you, but in Houston, no one talked more trash to me than Vrabel. And I remember yelling at Vrabes, and I'd be like, dude, you don't play anymore. Like, let Cushing talk crap to me, or like he'd be over on the sideline. I'll never forget. It was like OTA or minicamp practice, and it was hot. And he's over. We're going this way, away from the bubble, and we were doing some period, and he's hooting and hollering. I'm like, Vrabes, you're done playing. Like, let these guys talk.
Some things never change.
Can't take the player out of the coach. You mentioned the Super Bowl. All right, Hurts, Mahomes, clearly, the edge goes to Mahomes. But I think Hurts is one of those guys that doesn't get enough credit. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's this will be his second Super Bowl. So you could say whatever you want. I think people want to put quarterbacks in a box. And look, he does it a lot differently than Mahomes does it, and a lot differently than Brady did it. I mean, I think we've evolved to the point of the quarterback position that you can do it more than just one way. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you really look back to that last Super Bowl he played in, if he doesn't fumble that ball off of his knee for a touchdown, they probably win the game.
He played a great game.
Yeah, and he played in a tremendous game. But that just goes to show you that the margin for error is so small, especially at that position. But also, when you look at what they've added in Saquon,
right?
I mean, why would you not center the offense around him? If anything, I think it makes Jalen a better player because now
running game.
He's got a formidable, backfield partner that they can either put it in the belly and Saquon can take it for 70, and then when they commit to him, he can either pull it himself and run it for 50, or he can throw it to one of those receivers. So and now I know what people felt about us when we had like this success. Like I can't stand watching the Chiefs.
The Chiefs are unbelievable. But I have to ask you though, as a quarterback that played so many years, it has to amaze you, and I tell this to these guys all the time, how calmly and how easy the game comes to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Amazing. Yeah. He just I think, and we both were around Tom, and Tom, we would, I'm sure, agree that he's the best to ever do it with the amount of Super Bowls and all that. But this guy's like amazing at how easy the game is to him.
Did you see Tom was on his podcast and they were asking about Jaden Daniels, and he goes, well, how do you evaluate confidence? And he goes, there's just some people, and this kind of speaks to his mindset. There's just some people who look at the opportunity and say, what a great opportunity it's going to be when I go out there and win the Super Bowl or win this game. And then there's some other people. And for me, I would self-admittedly say, because I always felt like, where's the other shoe going to drop? Like I'm here, but I'm not really supposed to be here. You almost always had this, like, just don't mess it up.
Right.
Like you've gotten to this point, don't mess it up. Whereas guys like Tom and Mahomes and what Jaden Daniels did this year was, I mean, he played no part in losing that game of the Eagles. He played really well. It was the fumbles but there's just certain people who are built that way, and whether it's from 4 years old but like you hear stories about Tom didn't even play quarterback until he was a freshman in high school. So somewhere, now having known him for all these years and talking to his sisters and his parents, like he didn't want to lose at anything, even though he hadn't played football to that point. It was just a mentality.
Yeah,
and Mahomes is like, it's just, it doesn't matter. Nothing phases him, and he's just going to go out there, and it's a pretty impressive thing that he's done, but he's got to win 7 before he's going to go.
The other thing about these guys, though, and Brian would agree with this, is like when we were at the Patriots, and I'm sure that obviously the Chiefs feel the same way. It doesn't matter what game you're playing. You know you have a chance, and you probably will win every time you go out on the field.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whereas there's other times you go out and, other teams I was with, this is a kind of a mismatch. We're going to have a hard time winning this game. Even in New England when I was there, sometimes, the other team we were playing was, maybe, I wouldn't say maybe necessarily more talented, but they were a hell of a football team. But we were like, no, we're going to win because we got this guy.
Yes.
And that's the confidence that those very rare guys, they're rare, right? They're rare. It's rare to be an NFL quarterback like him. It's even more rare to be the best, to one of the best to ever do it. And that's what Mahomes is, and obviously Tom is. They give the whole organization, they carry them on their back. It's incredible.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting this year. This could be the best year ever for running backs.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because a few years ago, people were saying, "Oh, don't pay them, don't do this." But then you have 2 guys that go to new teams and in their first year. Yeah. But I do think they were smart about it. I mean, I don't know what the behind the scenes were, but when Saquon goes, I'm a free agent. Well, hold on, let me go to Philly because they have a quarterback that can run too.
Yeah.
Or same with King Henry, and he goes, pair me with Lamar and see what happens. Because as you know, so much about offense is putting a defense in a bind. And when I can't imagine what it is to game plan. Like, okay, what do? They put the ball in the running back's belly. Do you go for Saquon? You bring a safety down? Now they have an RPO. I mean, they really found a way to stress the defense to every blade of grass. And you have 2 guys in the backfield at the same time that could take it 70 yards at any given moment. And on top of that, they can throw the ball too. So it's amazing. I mean, even look at, and I feel bad for Josh Allen. It's my son's favorite player right now. You got to meet him before the game here at the end of the season.
It's unbelievable.
But look at what happened to his game when they established a running game.
Yeah.
Like Joe Brady takes over halfway through last year. They said, we're going to commit to running the football, which it drove me nuts that they kept trying to sneak him. I'm like, just put him in the shotgun with Cooks.
And run
a speed option or his own. Give him like where he gets a running chance.
No doubt.
But it's kind of, you see that dynamic added to football, and that's why these 2 running backs have had monster years.
Monster.
Enormous. And as Bill has said many times, we hear, who should the Patriots draft? If you're in that room on draft day, what was the weak part of your team last year?
Offensive line.
Bingo. Philadelphia has one of the best offensive lines ever.
So did Detroit up until they lost, but they had a phenomenal offensive line.
When you have guys like, you believe that Drake May is going to be the guy, and all indications are that he is. I've heard from people in the organization that he's just an awesome guy, and he's got all the tools. But you got to protect this guy.
Yep.
It's the same thing when we got Watson in Houston. He got sacked 68 times, and we were like, we got it. So that's when I traded for Laramie Tunsil because the ownership. We were all like, we can't. This guy can't, and so that's why we made that. Because the point being, that group of guys, and Tom, if he was sitting here right now, would tell you, having Matt Light, Nate Solder, Logan Mankins, Dan Copen,
tremendous,
all those guys, Steve Neal,
even Ryan Wendell.
Ryan Wendell was awesome. All those guys over the year, David Andrews, that Shaq Mason, Joe Thuney, who's doing an unbelievable job for Kansas City. Brian knows all these guys, but I'm just saying, like, Tom would be the first one to tell you, if we didn't have those guys, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did because they got to protect me.
Well, and the guy who coached them is legendary too.
Legendary.
Dante. The stories he told would.
Yeah, great coach.
Remember, Tom would never want to do the run game because he already knew it. So as he would be like, "Hey, Hoy, go take 9 on 7," which is just inside run. And I'd go over there, and I'm still learning the mic points and stuff, and I'd get the mic point wrong. He'd be like, "No, you dumb," and then he'd be like, "It's okay, you'll get it one day. You'll be okay." But like, I learned so much from him as a quarterback. Imagine with these offensive line, and every guy who's ever played for him loves him.
Loves him. Yeah, he was
There's some rumblings he's going to be involved with the Patriots now.
I was just going to say that. Yeah,
that was
3 days a week
today.
or something
he
like that.
Be.
Yeah.
Dante was a guest on our podcast.
Nice.
Oh, yeah?
He was one of our first
Nice.
guests, which obviously was great for David because that was,
he should be
coach.
involved. When you go to the Patriots, the first thing as an offensive coach, they put you with Dante. So like my first year, 2007, I was, for that first basically 6 months that I was there, I was with Dante. So I was in the O-line meetings. I drew his blocking sheets and then they shifted me over to be with Josh and the quarterbacks. But I was with Dante to learn the offensive line play. That's where I learned a lot of, I heard Tom the other day on a podcast, whatever, talking about, and Brian would definitely agree with this. A lot of quarterbacks don't totally understand protections.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, a lot of that's coaching. So, like, the coach has to be able to teach the guy, hey, man, in these protections, here's how it is, 50, 60, 70, same thing we do here.
Yeah.
Like, these guys have to know protections so that they can get us to the right people. And I learned all that from Dante.
The one thing that I would say that I learned from Billy and that system, and people always want to ask me, well, what's the deal with that system? Why is it so hard? Well, it's hard initially, but as he's saying right now, once you understand it, you can go out on the field and you have a lot of, we call them like tools in your tool belt, like you don't understand. And that offense, obviously I've been with you and with Josh, and you guys could go in each individual room. You could go to the offensive line room and you could coach them. Or you could go to the receiver room. And so when you're coordinating that offensive scheme, you have to know it as well as your assistant coaches know it, and then in turn coach your players. And you're right, Tom, I mean, he gets frustrated because there's a lot of, and I think this has to do with like how fast there's turnover. Guys just are like, what's the simplest way we can get our foundation in and go out and let these guys play?
Right.
Because I played in other systems where I felt like my hands were tied behind my back because they would just call the play and say, okay, go ahead. And I'm like, that's it? I just learned for 4 years about making a mic point, knowing what the protection problems are, and you're just telling me to just go out there and play football. Well, what if they do this? And they're like, well, don't worry, we'll make sure that they don't do that. I'm like, you can't do that. You can't do that.
That's why in New England, when you hear about like empty protection, when we were there, we were a great empty team. And the reason why we were a great empty team, one of the reasons why, was because we had a protection system that he could, get to pick up the things that he needed to pick up. It started out as just this certain thing. It was what we call a slide to the will. And then over time, as he became more experienced in the offense, he could take us to something else, and because he knew the will wasn't coming or whatever it was. So he incorporated it. It developed as his career went on. So by the time Hoy got there, we were teaching him empty.
I didn't get to learn the offense where Tom Brady learned it. That was the one thing I always said.
You had to learn it halfway through Tom's
I had to learn
career.
it like year 9 where it had gotten to like what he's saying. When Tom was a rookie, it was very simple. I remember him showing us the call sheet from that first Super Bowl. And I'm like, we don't even run these plays anymore. These are like basic in our mind. Remember that?
Yeah.
And like, and so people would always ask me, I'm like, well, you got to understand, you got to catch up to where Tom's at.
Right.
Because his greatest asset was his processing ability and knowing all these things, and that's why when you see him now, he's like, there's just bad football out there. But in his mind, because he sees everything, he understands it all. So we
talking about going back to what Hoy said about, and Hoy was competitive too. This is a great story about that, about Tom's competitiveness. So at the end of every Friday practice, these guys would they would throw from like the 10-yard line into a bucket in the corner of the end zone.
Yeah.
Belichick actually hated this,
Yeah,
but
he did.
I'm like, Bill, this is what they do. They're having fun doing this. And so anyways, we did it. And so it was money. Like there was money. Like, so if you threw 10 throws, if this guy got 8 out of 10 and you got 9 out of 10, then so we would chart it on the board. To this day, he won one year, right?
Yeah, I won.
But Tom said he didn't win, so it was under protest. So
no, the way Tom would approach it was, we'll just continue this to next season. Yeah. Like there was no ends. And but I was up so high on him, I was playing with house money. So I'm like, hey, how about that trash can down there for 50 yards for $4,000? He'd be like, yeah, let's do it. And then I hit it one time. Then he goes double or nothing. And this was honestly, I don't know how I did it. I hit 3 in a row. And at that point, I was like house money. And literally 2 years later, I don't know when this was. No, you were still there. We were playing at Oakland.
Yeah.
And I sit down in the locker room before the game, and he just hands me a wad of cash. This was from like 3 years ago. And I was like, all right, I'll take it.
He conceded.
That's awesome.
He conceded because he was too far behind.
I want to go back to the coaching, knowing every aspect. Is that like when we used to talk on the radio, like Patriots would look for that offensive lineman that could play center, could play guard, could play tackle. Was that similar with the coaching, then hires and fires? Or
yeah,
not
like
fires,
if you look
hires?
at really Josh McDaniels is the best example of this. So when Josh got there, he was a scouting assistant, and then being a scouting assistant, because one of Belichick's things is you got to understand the personnel of the players. You got to be able to evaluate players at all positions. So it's like I always say, it's like Karate Kid. You may ask like, why am I doing this? But then after 6 months, you're like, oh, I really understand what a corner looks like, or what a nickel should look like, or what a left tackle should look like, because I've been grinding on this for a long time. So that was Josh. And then when Josh came down to the coaching level, then come down because the scouting was upstairs and coaching was downstairs. He put him on defense. So he's on defense with Bill, Romeo Crennel, Pepper Johnson, Rob Ryan was in there. I mean, they had some dudes in there, some defensive coaches. And so then he learned defense, and he learned how defenses can be manipulated by the offense and how the offense can attack the defense. And then here come 2005 rolls around, and he makes him the quarterback coach. So he took him because remember, early on, Tom's very first quarterback coach died. And
that's right, Dick Raybein. Yeah.
And at that point, it was Bill and Charlie Weiss did it. Then they brought in like John Huffnagel, and over the course of time, they had some guys in there. And then Josh took it over, I think, 04, 05, he became the quarterback coach. So then he had learned all this defensive stuff and how to evaluate players. Now that's, to me, that's his deal with Tom. He took Tom's level of knowledge of defense to another level. I think that's what he did in Tom's career. Now he taught me a lot about that. Josh did, and then when he went to Denver, then I took it over and whatever. So like that's how Bill would train the coaches so that they could learn B-Flow. B-Flow was a scouting assistant. Then he was on special teams.
Yeah, when I was there, he was special teams coach, assistant to Scotty O. Yeah.
And then he became, he was working with the DBs, and then for a little while he was with us on offense, and then he went over to the DBs. So, and that's not hardly anybody does that.
Right.
And I think that was the key for me because, like I said, I was with the O-line. I would sit in on the linebacker stuff once in a while when I was first there. And then, I coached the receivers. I could coach the tight ends. I could, like Hoy's saying, because when you coordinate that offense, you got to have knowledge of all the positions to be able to, to coordinate.
You guys are all like utility infielders, man. You can play every position.
You try to, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Before we let you out of here, I'm going to hit you on Doug Marrone going to the Patriots.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that?
I think it's a great move for the Patriots. Great move by Mike. I'm pretty biased. I've been with, I'm one of Doug's. He's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
He's a great football coach. He's very technical. He's very knowledgeable. He'll understand that system. He worked for Sean Payton for many years in a similar type of system. He does a great job of developing players. He's he's a hard-nosed guy. He's already, Dante's already met with him a few times, which is good. Like you said, Dante's back involved with the program, just, helping out as a advisor and things like that, and that'll help Doug, and Doug will do a great job with Josh, and it's a good staff. It's a very, very strong coaching staff that they just hired Todd Downing to coach the wide receivers, which is a big hire. They're again, now it's going to come down to, as Brian would tell you, like, they got to get players. You got to get players in there. You got to get some receivers for this guy to throw to. You got to get some offensive linemen to protect him. You know what I mean?
It's a recruitment process.
So, well, I think the one thing, though, that Raves is going to bring, you heard it in his press conference, like, the entitlement's gone.
Yeah.
And for me, the one thing that I saw over 15 years in the NFL was the culture and the way that these young guys come in really shifted.
Yeah.
And I came up, the hardest way possible. I still had 2 years of two-a-days with Bill Belichick as the head coach, and we go in those meetings. I always tell the people the first day of OTAs when the veterans got there, I was a rookie, getting the team meeting. I'm excited. It's after the day after the first practice, the lights go off. And you can hear like the wind being taken out of the room. And the first clip that he throws up there, we ran Haas juke, and Tom tried to throw the ball on a seam route to Welker. And Bill's like, Brady, why would you try to throw to the smallest guy on our team 40 yards down the field? Just throw it to the guy over the ball. And like I was like, oh my God, how am I?
Set the tone.
He set the tone. And so I think Mike understands that, but he's also played.
Yep.
He the same way you asked me about being a veteran quarterback, I thought it was pretty cool. Mike hit on it. He goes, look, I've been a guy who was a grinder. Then I came to New England for the opportunity. I became a great player. Then I went to Kansas City and I became a mentor, and I was kind of a guy who had to show guys the rope. So he can relate to all these players in the room. Yep. And I think the generation of players in the NFL today, when I came in, we just wanted to be coached really well. Now I think these kids want to know how much you care about them. They want you to, and Mike will have a great balance of that.
He will. Yeah, but you're exactly right. There will be he will not suffer any fools in that room.
No, I can't.
So like if you're not a good teammate, if you're not a team guy, and Mike, we worked together in Houston, and he was instrumental in the careers of Clowney and Whitney Merciless and Cushing, and taking them to the next level, but also like teaching them about being a good teammate. That's going to be key with Mike. Staff chemistry is going to be key with Mike, and being a great teammate is going to be key with Mike. Like Brian's saying, there won't be any entitlement because there's very few guys that are there now, with the exception of David Andrews, that have even won a Super Bowl. Yeah. So like we didn't have anything to do with those Super Bowls. We got to set a new culture, a new era of Patriot football, and he'll do that. So
I listen to a lot of podcasts with Edelman and all of your old teammates.
You were great on Julian's podcast, by the way.
You guys all have a Belichick imitation, and it's all hilarious.
Well, I mean, you listen to it for 9-10 years of your life. It's like osmosis.
It's hard not to get
it's so funny.
You were great on Jules' podcast. A lot of great stories on there.
You know who his latest guest was?
Bill would always be like, Jesus, Hoyer.
Yeah.
I mean, are you really gonna do this, Hoyer? You know what I mean? Like,
do you remember the time when Tom couldn't practice, right? And we practiced in the stadium. It was like 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And I must have completed like 50% of my passes. It was a Thursday. And he brings up the whole team. He's like, Hoyer, where are you at? And I walk to the front of the huddle. He's like, how do you expect us as a team to come out here and have a good practice when you come out here and completely have a terrible day throwing the football? Like, how are the rest of us going to be any better? It was like my second year in the NFL. But I was held accountable, that's for sure. And then last one, when I would practice and Moss would be out there, Billy would get in my helmet. He's like, look, I just want you to take a drop, and I want you to throw it as far as you can to Randy Moss. Right?
Moss would say to me, we ran a route called a pistol. And so Moss would come in and he'd look at the routes for practice. He'd be like, and pistol's a deep route.
Yep.
Yeah. He'd be like, Billy, I'm giving you 2 pistols today. And I gotta swear, that mother ball better go to me on both those pistols.
Yeah.
I'd say, yes, sir, Randy.
Yeah, and so he would, Tom would be nursing some injury, so I'd be out there, and he'd call the play, and he'd be like, you need to throw to Moss on this ball. And he's like, I don't care what you do, just throw it as far as you can, and he will go catch it. And he did. He did.
Was there any uncatchable ball for Randy Moss?
I remember we always would say, hey, Randy, what'd you have? And he'd look over at us, and he'd just give us the touchdown signal. Like he's like, every play, if we didn't throw him the ball, would have been a touchdown.
The best podcast guy on Edelman, was Ornberger.
Oh, Ornberger was my roommate.
He was hilarious.
He was the funniest guy ever.
So I know you got to go, but you talked about me learning as a rookie. Julian and Rich, they talked about it on that episode. Rich and I were roommates, and we lived at the Residence Inn, so you kind of had like a living room. Yeah. We would clear all the stuff out, and we would I'd have the call sheet,
do walkthroughs,
and I'd get in a huddle, I'd call the play. Rich would go get the ball. He'd snap the ball. Julian would line up where he had to go. And so the three of us, we basically practiced the entire practice the night before. Because
in your Residence Inn.
Destroyed the Residence Inn.
Great rookie class right there, though.
That was a great rookie class.
Brian, this has been a pleasure, man.
It's awesome.
The best.
Anytime.
We can do it all day.
Yeah, we need to.
Who do you guys like in the Super Bowl?
Just straight winner. I'm going to go with the Chiefs because I don't ever bet against Pat Mahomes. Okay.
Yeah, that's the right way to go, but I don't want him to win, so I'm going to go with I think Saquon is a difference maker. I really do, and if they can try to take away Saquon, then it becomes a different game, but no one's been able to do that all year.
Right.
I mean, look at the first play of the NFC Championship game. They flip it out to him, and he takes it 70 yards. So I really do believe, was he there when you were there?
Or I recruited him. He was committed to Rutgers as like
nothing
a
but
grader.
the amazing, amazing guy about this guy, so... I'm not thinking with my head. I'm thinking with my heart, and I'm going to go with the Eagles.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
I'm going Philadelphia.
Me too. And for the Saquon reason.
Yeah, you should.
All three of you guys. Yeah. Let's go 20 each. 20 for you, 20 for you, 20 for you.
Deal.
How about 5?
How about a melted Kit Kat from Meter's pocket?
Yeah, some piece of candy in your pocket.
How about a Snickers? All right, Brian, we got to get you at the Heights this fall. I know you'll be there.
I'll be there.
BC football tickets are on sale now. Bill O'Brien and the Eagles gearing up to host 7 games at Alumni, including must-see matchups against 3 college football playoff teams, Notre Dame, Clemson, and SMU. The only way to guarantee your seats for these high-demand games is by securing season tickets. Visit bceagles.com or call 617-552-GO-BC to secure your seats today. And, oh, by the way, this is big time. Beginning the week of February 10th, audio for all episodes of the Bill O'Brien podcast will be published exclusively to the Podcast for Boston, the official podcast of BC Athletics. Be sure to like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. You can already find us on the Podcast for Boston or the newly redesigned bceagles.com. It'll still be found on the Bill O'Brien podcast channel for the time being. We are excited to continue growing the show and taking it to the next level. See that? We are elevating.
Big time.
That Western education just came out, all that
It's
reading.
the meter voice
Yes,
that your
it
kid
did.
loves.
Yes, it
Is
did.
North Carolina here this year or down there?
We
not
don't
playing.
play them until 2028, but something tells me that TV may get a hold of that, and
Really?
we don't in the regular season. We don't play them until 28.
Well, I'll be there whenever that happens.
Chestnut Bill versus Chapel Bill.
Chapel.
There
We're
you
going to
go.
get T-shirts made.
We're going
Yeah,
to do the
definitely.
Chestnut Bill T-shirts. Those are
I know
coming,
what sideline
Brian.
I'll be on.
Brian Hoyer. Great to see you.
Thanks, Hoyer.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much. And check out your podcast as well.
Quick Snap podcast with my co-host David Andrews, and that's the same thing. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff.
Excellent. We will not miss it. He's Ciaccio. He's Bill O'Brien. I'm John Meterparel. Have a great week, everybody.